Hey, what's going on, everybody? My name is Corey, better known as the Seaman, and I want to welcome you to another edition of the Seaman's Cinema Sit Down, my Marvel shirt, which features Wanda Maximoff, Scarlet Witch right there, and the WandaVision backdrop is already up on the screen, so you know what we're talking about. And if you followed me during my Mandalorian coverage, you know exactly what's going on, man. We're getting ready to talk some spoilers. But pretty much every Friday, while WandaVision is being dropped on Disney Plus, we'll be breaking it down and talking about it. First, non-spoiler action. If you haven't watched the episode, but you want to get excited for it beforehand, you want to get a vibe of what they're doing from a creative and conceptual and delivery perspective, but not have anything spoiled for you, well, then we got that non-spoiler review right up there. You can go check that out. But if you have watched the episodes and you want to know all the juicy things that are going on and where we could be going, well, then this is where you should be. So if you haven't watched the episode, I urge you, go check out the non-spoiler first. Watch the episode, then come back where we're going to spoil everything. So why don't you pull up a chair, man, take a seat. We are getting ready to dive in, spoiler-filled, into WandaVision's episodes 1 and 2. And as I said in my non-spoiler review, oh, it's so nice to have the MCU back. 2020 was a rough year, and lots of worse things happened in 2020 than Marvel not dropping any movies. But as a fan of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, oh, it's a killer not to have. Like, it's tragically missed having some Marvel content, just superhero content in general, outside of, The Boys and Umbrella Academy, which is on the TV side. Movie-wise, all we got was Birds of Prey, and then Wonder Woman snuck right in there at the end from DC, but otherwise, nothing major, and certainly nothing Marvel. Well, Marvel's back, and it's back in a big, bad way, man. These first 2 episodes of WandaVision did everything that I would have hoped for from this show, and has me feeling like we are going to be in for the magical, special ride I felt like we were going to be in for, based on, when the show was announced, how it was going to roll into Multiverse of Madness, seeing the first trailer, knowing that this was probably going to be the MCU's version of the House of M storyline. All of those things that I got excited for and were looking for. And then when it was revealed that it was going to be like a sitcom-styled show and all that sitcom stuff I wanted to look for, specifically the different eras of sitcoms, and decades, the 50s, the 60s, the 70s. And the show is executing all of that stuff perfectly. So what we're going to do is we're going to start at the top. We're going to work our way all the way through. Normally, I guess it'd probably be 1 episode a week, but today we'll work through 2 episodes. And as we go through, I'll kind of drop in hints and teasers and trips and things that I've picked up and potential theories of where we could be going with Wanda and Vision and the MCU moving forward. And the first episode, man, it did exactly what I anticipated. When we got that trailer and you saw them kind of driving in on what looked like, their post-wedding car into the suburb of Westview, as soon as I saw that in the trailer, I was like, that's where we're going to start. This show is not going to give us any kind of preface or setup. It is just going to go. And that's one of the genius things about this show, is by jumping right into it, there's a lot of mystery. And this might be Marvel's first mystery, real mystery. And it is a doozy, because I certainly have my thoughts and feelings. I've had them since, like I said, the show was announced. And different things. And they are definitely tackling that House of M storyline for the MCU. It might not have the immediate ramifications that the comics did, when Wanda lost her mind and altered all of reality. It shook up the entire universe. Seems, at least right now, this is far more localized just to this suburb that Wanda is in. But how that will potentially play out for the whole universe, it could have big ramifications depending on where they go. But what they're doing inside of at least the suburb, I'm really digging. And it's the fact that, this show should be representing Wanda following kind of a mental breakdown. She, as I mentioned in the non-spoiler, killed Vision, then had it rewound, watched Thanos kill Vision, then Thanos snapped her away, then she came back, then she helped defeat Thanos, yay, but then, wait, she came back into the battle, so but when the battle's done, you kind of have to regroup and figure everything out, right? You're not just acting on instinct, and it's, oh my gosh, what did Thanos do? I was a part of that. oh man, like we saved everybody, but we didn't save Vision. We didn't save Pietro. Quicksilver, like her brother. That's another traumatic, incident that's happened to Wanda. And much like the comics, Wanda's history in the MCU is riddled with ups and massive downs. And to lose, we saw how she struggled after losing, her brother, to then lose the love of your life, so to speak, before you could really even get to have him as the love of your life. That could really break somebody. And one, Elizabeth Olsen is just nailing the concept of, like, she's in this world and she's functioning in this world, but like every once in a while it's like, well, I can't remember this, or how did we get here? We're not why don't we have rings if we are married? I don't remember. Like, those moments, her and Bettany both are just pitch perfect, but it gives you this vibe of like Wanda losing her mind, and that's what I wanted. And then, like I said, they deliver on the sitcom stuff. And in episode 1, we get that, more Leave It to Beaver, I Love Lucy 1950s vibe. The era where women stayed at home and were just the housewives, and the men were out working. And very much that structure between men and women is not overly apparent. They don't beat you over the head with it, but there are moments, that there are instances where, like, somebody says something, you're like, okay, yeah, that definitely feels like we're in the 1950s. And from the sitcom elements, it plays into those things. There's a conversation with Catherine Hahn, the kooky next door neighbor, Agnes and Wanda, where, they're talking about what's at the crux of the first episode. It's this date that they wake up, they're just kind of going about their day. Vision's coming down, getting ready to leave for work. Wanda's in the kitchen cleaning up, using magic to do it, which definitely has the Bewitched vibes that I think we'll feel throughout all of these episodes, no matter what era we're in. But while they're doing it, they notice on the calendar, there's a heart on the date. So typically, if someone has a calendar and they put a heart on the date, specifically if they're a couple, it's usually the indication of an anniversary. And when Wanda and Vision both see it, neither one of them can remember anything. And there's actually a line where Wanda says, like, something about not remembering, and Vision's like, well, clearly, like, you must have forgotten it yourself. Like, if I can't remember, you must have forgotten. And it's one of those, like, delivered where you're going, yeah, that would be true, because if indeed Wanda has been the person to manipulate this universe or create this suburb, then everything that's not actually real, everything that's been created, Vision, because he's dead, we know she's created him in some form, it's actually Wanda. Anything that she has created is her. So, like, I loved hearing that line, because I was like, yes, that means you're playing in, you're tipping to me that, like, yes, this isn't the real Vision. This is something that was constructed, that was made most likely with Wanda's powers. And I love that. But then, like I said, you kind of delve into what that MCU ramification is with this show. But then they dive into the sitcom element, and it becomes neither one of them can remember what the day is, so we got to try to figure it out. Vision goes off to work and having a conversation with his boss, played by Fred Malamed, who's fantastic. He's like, oh, you and your wife, Mr. and Mrs. Hart, are coming over for dinner. That's why the heart was on there, because it's representative of their name. It is a shorthand, which and they figure it all out later on in the episode. She's like, you can move faster than, like, the speed of sound if you wanted to, and, like, I'm magical and we need shorthand. We don't need shorthand. Wonderful stuff, dude. There's things I love about the show are like those little moments. But on the flip side, Wanda's trying to figure out what the heart means. So when she's talking to Agnes, it's clearly like what the audience is thinking. Oh, it's your anniversary. And now you set up one of these classic kind of, tropes from sitcoms, and specifically that world of the 50s sitcoms, where it's like you have the husband thinking one thing's going on, you got the wife thinking something else is going on, and when it is around a dinner party, there's all sorts of mayhem because the things are off. So when they show up for dinner, she's got, all the candles are lit, and she's got, like, the scarf over top of the lamp to create, like, mood lighting, and she's got the sexy kind of nightgown on dress rather than, like, a regular, dress for company. And when everyone shows up, it's like, what's going on? And then quick, we got to try to figure out and fix it. And on top of that, because she thinks it's the anniversary, all she's got is one strawberry. She doesn't have a home-cooked meal. So now it's another one of those sitcom classic tropes. How do I get this home-cooked meal prepped and ready in the blink of an eye while we can distract them long enough to pull it off? And all of that stuff is just excellent. It's laugh out loud funny. And I love watching, Wanda and Vision obviously together, but also separately. Vision in the office is great, and they make, references to like technology or robots or mechanics several times in both episodes. And anytime that comes up, Bettany's Vision is immediately like, no, like I'm not a robot. I'm not a machine. I'm a person. I'm a human being. Like at home, he looks like Vision, and when he leaves to be around people, he changes his appearance. And that's cool. Anytime he changes his appearance, you get kind of like the little cartoony sparkles around his face that just scream bewitched every time they happen. In the same where, Wanda doesn't wiggle her nose like Samantha did. She wiggles her fingers when she needs things to happen, and it follows with a like kind of noise that you would get when Samantha would wiggle her nose. Like I said, I love the way they incorporate all those things. Like if you were a fan of sitcoms, specifically classic sitcoms, you're gonna love this show. But like seeing Vision interact at work, with his coworkers, and knowing that he is, a sentient being, but he's, an AI. He's not real. He's not an actual human. And anytime anything that's non-human gets brought up around Vision, the way he reacts or freaks out is great. And I love seeing the way he interacts, with the people. Like, he gets all of his reports done really quick and just drops them off. And, the guy next to him is just like, man, that was so fast. Like, I guess the music doesn't bother you at all. I loved all that. But also love, like, him trying to figure out what it is they do at this job, because so many sitcoms, specifically way back in the day, is just like, you got the dad, and dad leaves for the job, and you never really see what it is that he does for work. You might be in the office and you might see them doing things, but it's like, what is the actual job? And when Vision brings that up, everyone is just, I think it's like not copying, but like composition or whatever. It has to do with like paper and reporting. And it's like reporting on themselves. Like, it's just this loop where nothing ever really tells you what they do. And I love that they play with that. And like, that's the fun that I was looking for in this show. And same when while he's at work, you got Wanda first meeting Agnes, and that's one of those, like, I'm your next door neighbor, so glad you moved to town, where are you guys coming from, what's your deal, why don't you have any kids, like all of these things where it's like, oh yeah, that's right, there's again that uneasiness that kind of slowly slips in that first episode. It's super subtle. It's not like brash in your face until you get to the back end of the episode. But watching her interact with Agnes is just great, because once you get past like the fact that she can't really remember anything, and she starts talking about the date, and she's like, oh, your anniversary. She's like, yes, what do? I don't know what to do. Because in reality, Wanda and Vision, they, as they said in Infinity War, they steal time. So they haven't really had a full relationship. And she's clueless. So what do? Back in the 50s, if you didn't know what to do for your man, you went to the magazines that would tell you what to do for your man. You kind of get all this stuff, set up so that when he shows up, you have that chaos. And it starts with like Vision going to put his jacket. She comes down the stairs and goes right up behind, Fred Malamud does one of these, like, guess who? And they immediately have to like start reacting on their toes. And Vision's first thing is, oh, well, that's a Sokovian tradition. She's from Europe, even though she doesn't have a European accent, because the European accent would not play into the character that she needs to be for these sitcoms. I'll be very interested to see if Wanda's accent starts to come back as we progress further into the show and she starts to figure out more of what's going on. But right now, like, she doesn't have the accent. If anything, Bettany's got the more accent of the two of them. But like, start playing, like, these are customs, so that at the end of the episode, when Mrs. Hart is leaving, like, she comes up and she's like, your guest is leaving the house now. Like, I love the way that they kind of play with those elements, and again, that sitcom style, but adapting it into this MCU story. And I just kind of love all of that. And then it becomes this, we need to talk to each other in the kitchen. You guys kind of calm down. what's going on? I thought it was our anniversary. Oh, that's a wonderful thought. Oh, it could have been our anniversary. But like, no, the hearts. And that's where, she was like, we don't need shorthand. Like, you're a computer basically, and I have magic. We don't need shorthand. Why would we do that? That's how we get into this conundrum. And so many, sitcom conundrums are just these lackadaisical, oh, I can't remember, or put something simple together that create these ridiculous situations. So it's, okay, you get dinner ready, I'll go stall them. And Bettany, this is where we get to see Bettany really pour on that charm and that humor that he's so good with. And as he's trying to, distract the hearts, Wanda's just like, I don't know what to do. She calls Agnes. Agnes brings over all of this food. And then as soon as Agnes leaves, you start doing the magic, but it starts making all this noise. And, first they drop a pot, and Agnes kind of freaks out. So Mrs. Hart's like, what is going on back there? And you get the don't go back there. And by the time, Agnes leaves, I love the way she comes in. She's just like, what kind of a housewife would I be if I just didn't have enough for a 3-course meal just lying around the house for me and Ralph, her husband, who Agnes mentions many times in both episodes, but we never see. Another one of those kind of classic sitcom tropes of like, there's a character that we never see that's off screen somewhere. And anytime she references him, you're like, yeah, where is her husband? He's never anywhere. And I just kind of love that and stuff. But eventually Wanda, after destroying most of the food, like at one point she's trying to figure out the lobster, and when Vision comes in, she freaks out, throws it out the window, and it somehow ends up on the door at the end of the episode, and then it starts like, oh, what a wonderful like knocker. Like, that's that sitcom humor that I love. But they kind of recover. Mrs. Hart almost figures it out. Like the house has one of those like dividers. It's like a wall, but it has like an actual partition divider that you can close to see into the kitchen or not. And she goes to open it, and as she does open it, the song Yakety Yak, which was playing in the office, Vision just starts singing it out loud and draws all the attention. And you see Wanda, and everything is most likely hanging from strings because it doesn't look CGI'd and smooth. It kind of looks jankety, which it look like. If you were doing this in the 50s, it would be. Everything is on strings, and it's just kind of floating there. And she like quick shuts everything. And when Vision comes back, he's like, how can I help? And then they kind of flip-flop. She gets rid of the nightgown, puts on like a real dress, goes to try to entertain. Vision's tenderizing the meat or pulverizing it. They eventually have to flip-flop back, and at some point everything is, Vision comes back. They flip-flop one more time. Vision comes back, and Wanda's just like, oh, I'm gonna just off the cuff, man. She makes breakfast for dinner, and they kind of again play into the what a European custom or thing of that nature, enough to save it where like the dinner can go on. And then that's where we finally get to kick into that uneasy, that unsettling nature that like, this isn't right. Something here is wrong. And, it's the question of like, how did you meet? How did we get here? What is your guys' story? And Wanda has nothing. Vision has nothing. And Mr. Hart starts getting like, really, like, I don't understand. Like, what's going on here? Like, just, it shouldn't be this hard to tell a story. Why don't you have kids? They really drive home that why don't you have kids thing a lot in the first episode. And while he's doing that, he's chewing, and then he starts to choke, and then he falls down. And the whole time, Wanda and Vision are just stuck. Nobody's saying anything. And, Mrs. Hart's trying to get Mr. Hart to stop. And when he starts coughing, she's like, stop it, you're not being funny. And then he falls over. And it's funny, you're just kind of sitting there, and everyone is just sitting by while this man is about to choke to death. And it's that feeling of like, maybe these people are real, but obviously Vision is a creation of some kind. I still think Wanda probably created him. But there is obviously a bigger thing going on in some way. And so I'm not, man, it's a real mystery. I'm not like 100% sold on it, but like, I think Wanda's up to it. And the fact that Wanda would stop and all of a sudden have this break, kind of like reality is trying to get into her head. Like, hey, this is wrong. Like, wake up type of deal. Vision would also kind of stop. And as he's choking almost to death, she finally is like, Vision, help him. And that's when Vision kind of snaps out of it. And instead of giving him the Heimlich or like he phases his hand through Hart and pulls out, the piece of meat that he was choking on. And then right from that point, the Harts are just like, we're gonna go. Man, that was fun. Had such a great time. And it's this crazy drastic shift of like this uneasy, unsettling sequence that you're taking place, and then as soon as it finishes, boom, kicks back into the sitcom, and it kind of takes Vision and Wanda more so off guard. Like you see in Liz Olsen's face as they're like, well, this was a great dinner, so thanks so much, I'm gonna leave now. And it kind of kept, like, you can tell like she's kind of unsettled by the whole thing, but then falls herself back into the sitcom. And it's almost like a moment of clarity kind of slips through and then back into the illusion. And then as they leave, like I said, you have the lobster hanging on the door. And, once they leave, we end the episode with them sitting on the couch, where we've seen that shot of them sit and, like, Wanda put her head on his shoulder. That first conversation they have is like, we are really an unusual couple, aren't we? And like something is weird, but at the end of the day, it's like, all of this, I do it because like I love you bit, and like they kind of come in for a kiss, and while they're kissing, Vision turns the TV on, like, 'cause that's what they're gonna do. And as that kind of happens, all of a sudden we start to kind of fade out, and you're thinking that maybe this is gonna be like what the end credit sequence looks like, or something of that nature. And as you pull out, like you actually pull out to an actual TV little monitor, and there's a person writing things down and watching, and it's like they're watching the sitcom that we just watched. I'm undecided as to what that means. Is that a style choice? Like the person who's monitoring what's going on with Vision and Wanda, whoever this person is or who they work for, and we'll get to potential people that could be working for. Is that just like a stylistic choice because like we were in the sitcom, so they're watching the sitcom? Or is what they're actually watching a sitcom? Like, is the manipulation of this world turning it into episodes of a sitcom? Like, each day that goes by is just a different episode, and things are just kind of changing on the fly, even though they have that feel of like, we've been here for, like, it feels like, from episode 1, episode 2, it feels like a week or maybe multiple weeks have passed in the world. Maybe that's not the case. It was one of these kind of strange things, and sure enough, when they did like the recap for episode 2, the last thing you see is that person monitoring that monitor, and I'm like, clearly somebody is monitoring the situation. We saw that in the trailers. And what's interesting is it could be several different things. Episode 1 does not hint at either of the two main culprits that I think are at play here, but it does hint at a potential play of somebody else or something else being involved in the universe. And what's cool is, like I said, this sitcom style is, sitcoms have built-in commercial breaks. Most television programming has built-in, like the way a scene ends will allow you to kind of dip into a black so a commercial can run and then come back up. And that happened about halfway through the episode. I was like, oh, that's funny. They're gonna like fade to black and then fade back up. Like, if you've ever watched, something like Full House on Netflix, say, like when the commercial break will happen, there's no clean transition. You see that dip, and then all of a sudden the commercial actually starts playing. And what's cool is they're dropping in commercials halfway through these episodes that pay homage or nod to different things in the universe. And the first thing that they nod to in the outside world is Stark Industries. We get this commercial for a toaster. And a toaster, apparently, that can do open-faced grilled cheese sandwiches and meatloaf. They don't demonstrate that. They just show the toast go in and the toast come up. But it's produced by Stark Industries. The Stark Industries have something to say here. Obviously, we know Tony is gone, but Pepper is aware of Wanda and everything else. So, like, is Stark Industries someone interested in what's going on? Are they playing into what this... I mean, we've seen that force field in the trailers, so is it a prison of some kind? Seems a little far-fetched for Stark Industries to be involved, but it's the first outside thing that we are shown in, the show. And then in episode 2, there's a helicopter that has an important piece to play in all of this, but the colors are red and that gold yellow, the Iron Man colors, and it's like there seems to be like a little bit of a dark cloud floating over it. So I don't know if they're involved at all. The other two parties, both of which we get a little bit more of an idea of in episode 2, are S.W.O.R.D, which I mentioned in my trailer breakdown. S.W.O.R.D is a division in the intergalactic realm. It stands for Sentient World Observation and Response Department. So it's a department that is monitoring sentient worlds and sentient beings to make sure that there's no threat in the galaxy angle. What's interesting is that I was doing some prep work before the show came on, and IGN had an article about S.W.O.R.D and its place inside of potentially the show. There's a Marvel app that is called Marvel Collect. Basically, it's like a Topps card, trading card app where you can collect Marvel cards, and I guess you can trade them online with people, stuff of that nature. But they had released a new set of cards that seem to be lining up and syncing up with WandaVision, specifically the fact that Monica Rambeau would be a S.W.O.R.D agent. Well, inside of these cards, S.W.O.R.D's name has a different acronym: Sentient Weapon Observation Response Division. If that is what S.W.O.R.D is, then it would make more sense, right? When we first saw S.W.O.R.D, I was like, oh man, maybe this is leading into Secret Invasion more than House of M, and maybe like the space station that we see Samuel Jackson on at the end of Captain Marvel, maybe that's a S.W.O.R.D station. But then why would S.W.O.R.D be interested in Wanda and Vision, or specifically Wanda? They're very much trying to reach out to Wanda through the course of the second episode. But any kind of sentient weapon observation, any superhero that could create a weapon-sized catastrophe with their superpowers could theoretically be monitored by S.W.O.R.D. Following Endgame, you had the Sokovia Accords to make sure that there was responsibility taken for these superheroes when they did things. But maybe we need to monitor superheroes. So maybe that's what S.W.O.R.D could be inside the show, the sentient weapon. These weapons that are beings. And Wanda certainly is the most powerful and dangerous of all the beings. And if in the interim what we haven't seen off screen is that Wanda was losing her mind, maybe they were able to contain her and S.W.O.R.D is monitoring. But at the end of episode 2, and we'll get into it more as we go through that episode, there is like a break on the radio where someone is trying to call out to Wanda, like, Wanda, what's going on? Who's doing this to you? So it would make me think that if S.W.O.R.D is the group trying to contact Wanda, maybe they're not responsible for what's going on. Maybe somebody else is responsible. And that third person at play could be the second commercial that we get in the show. And that shows up in the second episode. Halfway through episode 2, we get a watch commercial. And again, playing into the setting. Now we're moving to the 1960s in episode 2. And again, it's kind of one of these things with like just viewpoints that kind of hint to the era that you're in. And in the commercial, it's like, you have 2 accessories as a man that you have to have. Your pretty lady, which is just absurd. A woman is not an accessory. But again, it speaks to the era that the show is kind of trying to play in. And then the second is their watch. And the watch that he has, or the name of the watch, is like, and the other thing that you have to have is your Strucker. Like Baron von Strucker. And in the symbol of the watch is the Hydra symbol. And those of you who are familiar with the whole MCU, Baron von Strucker was the one who was supposedly behind the creation of Pietro and Wanda. In the comics, they're mutants. In the MCU, they didn't have mutants to play with because Fox owned the mutants. So they became constructions from an Infinity Stone through experiments by Baron von Strucker. Baron von Strucker is back. It would make a ton of sense for him to want to go and track down Wanda, because that is his ultimate weapon. And if he is trying to, influence her in any way, which also kind of plays into the House of M storyline, where in that story, while Wanda does have a mental breakdown that alters all of reality, spoilers, Pietro, Quicksilver, he actually is the one that convinces Wanda to give everybody what they want. The reality that she creates, everybody has what they want to make them happy. Peter has his uncle back, and he's with he's not with Mary Jane, but he's with Gwen Stacy, his first love. Anything that anybody could want, like Cap got a full life. He's an old man in House of M. And it's all Pietro behind, changing everything or how things get changed. Maybe Von Strucker is the one making Wanda create whatever she's in, and maybe he's trying to get, to her kids, because the one thing that is apparent in these two episodes is episode 1 is, why don't you have kids? You guys are a married couple, supposedly, in the 1950s. You should have kids. Why don't you have kids? And then the second episode has that Stepford Wives vibe I was talking about. When we get to the planning committee, and specifically Dottie, and Emma Caulfield, Ford's kind of take of that real heavy Stepford Wives vibe of like a leader. Every once in a while, everything they do, she's like, for the children. And then literally everybody at the exact same time goes, for the children. Almost like that kind of Stepford Wives mind control bit. But that message is like just for the children, for the children, for the children. But there are no children. We've seen no children in the show. And by the time we get to the end of the episode, Wanda has actually become pregnant in the blink of an eye. Like, she gets up, she turns, and as she turns, all of a sudden the belly is there. So is Strucker maybe trying to get Wanda to create children so that he could have, again, a pair of kids that he could maybe test, do experiments on? And obviously we know that the Vision and Wanda's children that Wanda created herself, which leads to the whole House of M thing. When she creates these children, they're eventually taken away by Agatha Harkness. They just make them disappear, and they erase that from her memory. House of M sparks when her memory starts to come back. Someone mentions something that triggers, I had children? What? My children? And that's how she loses her mind. So here, we might know that Wiccan and Speed are integral to potentially lots of things that could be going on for the MCU in Phase 4, but maybe it's Von Strucker that wants them, because we've had no indication of a real relationship between these two in the MCU, so there'd be no reason for Wanda to suddenly just want children out of nowhere. So maybe it's someone trying to force her to create children, to get more powered beings that you could manipulate and control. Really, really interesting thing that I would love to see. Oh, I would love to see them bring Strucker back. That would be awesome. But anyway, I completely digress. While we have these theories, and one of the other things too is that helicopter I mentioned, that was red and gold. The symbol that's on it is S.W.O.R.D. That's our first real appearance of S.W.O.R.D, where we're like, oh, there we go. We know that they're in it. And then the number 57 is very apparent on the screen. I haven't figured out what that is. I'm thinking that it might be a comic book number. I just don't know which comic book yet. So if you figured out what the 57 on that helicopter is, let me know. But while the second episode certainly gives us lots of moments like oh man, that helicopter, and it's in color. That's the other thing. The only thing to be in color thus far has been the helicopter, and then Dottie actually breaks the glass and cuts her hand in the blood. Red seems to pop, and then the gold, for whatever reason. But we've seen like these kind of additions of just things kind of dropping in that seem to talk about the outside. And like the same thing when she's with Dottie and they're having that conversation, all of a sudden the radio starts cutting out, whether they're doing "Help Me Rhonda," but then all of a sudden it's like, "Help me Rhonda, help me Wanda, Wanda, can you hear Wanda?" And someone trying to call out, who is that person? Is it Stark? Is it S.W.O.R.D? I don't know, but I love all these kind of little elements that are setting up things at play that could be bigger in the universe. And then as far as the second episode goes, I, again, thoroughly enjoy it. It does capture that vibe of that 60s realm of sitcom, specifically with the open. The 50s, sitcom open, a real kind of like, almost like jingle kind of tune to the sitcom opening theme music. The theme music changes completely, and the theme open changes completely to something that fits more from the 60s, or specifically Bewitched. The opening is identical almost. The opening credit for Bewitched would be like stars appearing in the sky, and the stars start to appear, but the way they appear kind of forms the gemstone that would be Vision's head, which I thought was really cool. And then Wanda comes flying in, much like we would see Samantha come flying in on her broom, and the whole open is animated. And there's this whole thing where later on Vision accidentally swallows gum, and every time we go inside his body, cuts to a cartoon version of like a machine getting grinded up with like gum and stuff. So screams that era, and like I love the direct nod to Bewitched, because obviously that's the one thing that, like I said, I think we'll see elements or vibes of that throughout the whole show, because if you're taking the sitcom and the fact that she is, the Scarlet Witch, she has magical powers, Samantha is the most logical person for her to connect to in the sitcom world. So to have that like direct correlation in the episode that should represent the 60s, which also is the episode that we form to color. As she finds out she's pregnant, the whole world colorizes. And Bewitched was a show that started in black and white and became colored. So I love those little hints and nods to that show in there. But as we come up, we see the two of them practicing like a magic bit, and what you find out is that there's this big talent show to raise money for the school, and that's where this committee exists and where Dottie kind of runs all of those things. But while they're doing their magic bit, he says like a word, and then Wanda comes out and she brings out this thing, and it's one of those where she goes in, he closes the door, he says something magical, and then it's empty because she's not there, and the wall in the back spins, and there's a compartment for her to hide in. But what he says immediately made me go, wait, well, say that again? The names that they give themselves, their stage names, are Illusion and Glamor, which is a husband-wife mutant couple in the comics that use their powers to do magic shows. And that's how they pull off all of their tricks. Loved it. What a wonderful freaking nod to the comics, to mutants. That's one of the other things that watching this episode, specifically after just rereading House of M ends with, Wanda kind of dealing or starting to understand things that are going on, and she just goes, no more mutants, no mutants. And the reality that everybody wakes up to seems to have reverted back to the original reality, except most mutants don't have their powers. It seems, like Emma Frost and Nightcrawler and, some of the other characters have maintained their powers, but a lot of the mutants just lose their powers. Again, we have no mutants in this world, so wouldn't it be fun to take the House of M storyline, flip it on its head? Instead of ending mutants, have it create mutants. And referencing to mutants inside of episode 2 directly was so cool. And that was the thing that kind of made me start thinking, like, maybe that's what we're going to do. Like, we know that this is going to eventually lead to the multiverse, which we assumed could lead to mutants. But maybe what Wanda is doing in and of itself, maybe the creation of Wiccan and Speed, whatever it is, maybe that's the creation of the mutants. That would be a really cool way to twist and play with that story, and still, like I said, hold to the essence, but give us something that's brandy new. But that is, going back to the actual magic trick, that's the baseline of the episode. Is that, they have, that's what we're building to. You got to make sure that they do this. And for Wanda, the big thing is wanting to be normal, wanting to fit in. And the other, comic series that I think a lot of people have referenced is the 2015 The Vision series. It was, I think, maybe 5. I think it might have been 5 issues or 6 issues, something like that. But a short run where Vision basically creates his own family. This is post him and Wanda, no longer being together because, he gets destroyed, and when he's rebuilt, he, has his mind is kind of wiped, and he's installed his memories, but it's a different version of Vision. Eventually, they're able to bring back like the old version. But in that time period, Wanda leaves Vision. So this, Vision is, he was obviously like, she's with Wonder Man, whose brainwaves Ultron used to create Vision. She's like, that's why I like him. He's very much like you, but he's not you. So I created a stone for you to use that has my brainwaves. So maybe you could create a wife for yourself that would remind you of me, but isn't me. So Vision creates a wife and then 2 kids, and they just kind of try to live in the suburbs. And the whole concept behind that run, while it gets really dark and messed up, is just wanting to be normal, wanting to fit in. And Wanda, that's very much at the root of what she's wanting to do. While the suburb style kind of seems to be a nod to the Vision, and even the Hearts, kind of a nod to the elderly couple who are their neighbors in that run. The idea of fitting in very much is a huge thematical bit from that storyline that's being applied here. And, she's magic, he's a machine, and they are trying to pass as just normal people. I want to be normal. I want to fit in. We got to make sure this talent show goes over smooth. And then they have their own separate things to go to. Vision, after the opening of the episode, is them in two separate beds. And then this is the first time we really see, I think, manipulation from Wanda directly as far as, like, changing something in the world. And not just, like, using magic to float stuff around. But, like, she slides the beds together. And then by the time you get to the end of the sequence, which is them hearing, like, a branch banging on the window, but it freaks both of them out. And freaks out Vision so much that he's like, someone should go check that out. And Wanda's like, yeah, someone should go check that out. Really, really funny stuff at the open of the episode. But then you see her, like, Vision's like, oh, but I do like that you use this to make this change in the room. I like this change. And then she turns it into one bed. Because classically, in the 50s, you were in separate beds. And then eventually one bed, which might have been the 60s in TV. I could be wrong. That I'm not totally sure of when the separate beds became not a thing. But regardless, like, that's the first time we really see her actually, like, turn something into something else right in front of her eyes. But because of that, Vision wants to go check out the neighborhood watch meeting that's going on at the library. So he goes over there, where we see a lot of the same guys we saw in The Office. And then Wanda is off to one of these committee meetings getting ready for the talent show, which is where we meet Dottie and a bunch of the other women and this kind of Stepford Wives vibe that we got going on there. And what's fun is, like, Vision, when he gets to the library, they're like, dude, this is kind of like a private, like, invite only type group. And he's like, oh, okay, cool. I'll just sit here and be completely quiet and wait for you to, like, bring up new things. And I was like, well, we're doing that now. He's like, great. It's like, no, but, like, bringing up new things just means, like, we're gonna have more pastries. Have, like, a box of pastries or whatever. And then they just kind of start talking, and Vision ends up being kind of funny, and the guys, like, kind of start not intentionally funny. He's like, you want to know something? This guy's a communist. And they're like, hi, you're so funny. Like, we thought you were kind of a square at work, but you're okay. And they kind of accept him in. And the one guy offers him gum. He goes, well, actually, when he gets offered the pastry, he's like, no, I don't eat food. And everybody's like, you don't eat food? And he's like, in between meals, I don't eat food. And then, at mealtime, I eat all of the food. So when they offer him the gum, he's like, someone else is like, you heard him, he doesn't eat food, man. And he's like, well, gum's not really food. He's like, I'll give it a go. And he chews it and then accidentally swallows it. And that's where you see, like, the cartoon image of it going down. And his stomach is like a bunch of gears, and the gum grinds up the gears. But rather than it just completely, like, ruining Vision to not be functional at all, it makes him drunk, is kind of the outcome. Like, after that happens and you kind of see that he's acting weird, you go back to the committee meeting, and then we go to the actual talent show, and it's going on, and Wanda's like, where is he? Why isn't he showing up? And then you see Vision's walking, and he's like, and he does. And that's, I said the second episode, he reminded me of his character from A Knight's Tale. Because he gets up and he's got to do this whole show, but he's, seemingly hammered, but it's the gum just gumming up his systems. And watching him try to do everything is absolutely hysterical, and when things aren't going right, he's like, I'm gonna just make your minds blow because I can do this. And he starts, like, floating, because he can make himself lighter than air. And everyone immediately is like, what? And Wanda wants to be normal, so she wiggles her fingers instead of her nose and creates, like, a pulley system. And then one of the guys is like, oh, look, no, it's a rope, it's a pulley system that's holding him up. Love just the fact that it wasn't there, and then it is. Oh, just play with it. Again, kind of playing into the fact that Wanda can manipulate things in the world. Even the fact that, like, something that was there and not there, people don't realize it. So maybe she has an impact on them that way as well, without her even realizing that that's what she's doing. That's one of the other things from House of M, is that she doesn't necessarily know exactly what she has done or hasn't done. So the idea that things could be happening out of her control, I love that element as well. But then it's like, I think the next thing he does is, he's like, I'll show you a feat of strength, and he can densely bring his molecules together to get stronger and heavier, and he lifts up a piano that one of the other characters had just played. And Wanda's only thing to do there is when he puts it down, she wiggles her fingers again, and she goes and picks it up and is like, oops, you weren't supposed to see how this trick was done, and then it's a giant piece of cardboard. Love that entire bit. So much so that when we get to the end, it seems like, Wanda's kind of saving it. Everybody's laughing because Vision is just absurdly funny. And she's just kind of holding it together. And you get to the big, you bring out the magic box to make her disappear. It's open, and he closes it, he locks it, and he taps on it, and he's like, says whatever is magic. Oh, and that's the other thing too, flourish. I guess they must have scripted this out. So instead of, doing a flourish, he goes, and flourish at the end of everything. Wanda's even like, you don't have to say it out loud. But when he does like his flourish there, he's like, nothing happens, and then Wanda's like, Vision. He's like, oh, when they open it, this other character, Geraldine, being played by Tiana Paris, who is Monica Rambeau, Maria Rambeau's daughter, just all grown up, who is a S.W.O.R.D agent. But inside of this reality that we're in this, suburb, she's Geraldine. So again, does Wanda have the ability to manipulate real people, turn them into what she wants them to be? Clearly, it's not like an undercover bit at all. She has no clue who she is. And just finally getting that appearance, and the first person that we know inside of this world, besides Wanda and Vision, that's being manipulated inside of the world, it seems like. But she's the one that pops up out of the thing. And while Wanda thinks everything's gone terribly, and they're just trying to, like, let's get out of here before they, get us. And at that point, they go in the backstage. She's like, what is your deal? And she kind of scans him and is like, oh, and takes the gun out of him. And he's like, well, that did it. Now I feel much better. He tries to crack a joke that he was cracking with the gum in it that doesn't really fly. And he's like, I guess that doesn't work without the gum, huh? They try to sneak out, and Dottie's up on the stage, and she's like, you two. And they're like, oh man, they're gonna like rip them apart because they ruined the talent show. And instead, they were the funniest thing to ever happen to the talent show. Nothing that good. They get the first inaugural like funniest act award. And it's like this cute, oh, they did find a way to fit in normally. And when they go home, they, have a way more positive kind of ending building up. And it's like that uneasiness was during that sequence, at the committee meeting when, Dottie is talking to Wanda. And that's the other thing. While she's talking to, it's almost like Dottie might also be from the outside world knowing about Wanda. Because she goes, I don't believe you. Like, you're not who you are type of deal. And like, she knows like the real version of her. Is kind of the tone and the delivery behind what you're getting in that scene with Emma Caulfield Ford. And it is just this really weird moment where almost like her characters become like completely lucid for a second. And that's when the radio breaks and they kind of focus on that. And when they come back, again, it just magically snaps back into that sitcom style. So they go home, and you think we've had the unsettling uneasiness already happen. And same thing, the episode ends with them kind of going in for a kiss, and there's a loud banging noise outside, and Wanda's like, I'll go check it out. And when she goes to check it out, you see the manhole cover sliding off in the road, and then a dude in a beekeeping suit with bees flying all around him emerges from the sewer. No clue who he is, what he could mean. I'm going to have to do some research on that one. And if it is something that will come back, but we get this really interesting moment where as it's happening, he just kind of looks right at her, and it feels like somebody from the outside to get into this manipulated reality that we're in uses the sewers to come up and under. Maybe that's a way to penetrate into this world. Maybe not. I don't know. But it was really weird to watch Beaver come out of the sewer. And then what's awesome is Wanda just immediately goes, no. Like, no, this isn't going to be a thing. And immediately manipulates reality and rewinds it. And like we see, like someone rewinding like an old VHS tape. Visually, everything rewinds back to that like kiss. And instead, when they go in for it, there is no noise. Nobody goes outside. They stay inside. And, changes. Everything changes. And that's where they then move back to the couch. And when she gets up to go do whatever, they move back to the couch, and she kisses Vision again. When she pulls away, just Vision's head is pink. And then they start to see the whole world like start to colorize itself. And then when Wanda gets up and turns, she's pregnant. And that's one of those things where immediately, as soon as I saw it, I was like, oh, that's an awesome nod back to the comics, because one of the things that, like I said, leads to the House of M is her knowledge and remembering that she had children that she created, that then Agatha Harkness made disappear and then wiped like completely because they were fictional, they weren't real. They just manifested because of Wanda wanting them so badly. No indication that she wants kids, but like I said, you have that, why don't you have kids? Why don't you have kids? For the children, for the children. Boom! End of the episode. Now suddenly she's become pregnant. And that's one of the other things I love too about the show. I kind of glossed over the ending, but the endings and beginnings of both episodes have been kind of fun. The beginning of the first episode, you see them right as they're, like I said, it just starts them driving into town, and they're coming from their supposed wedding. She's in the wedding dress. He's all dressed up like the groom, like we've seen in the trailers, and he goes to carry her through the threshold, and just being Vision and it being a sitcom, like, I don't open doors. And he's even, they've talked about, like, you should open doors, Vision, rather than just coming into rooms through walls. And he phases through the door and naturally drops Wanda as soon as he does it. She kind of lands and looks at, like, really, dude? Like, come on. Beautiful sitcom humor. And then it just kind of goes into the opening theme credit from there. And the opening in the second episode, like we were saying, was them doing the magic show, which was great, and I love that nod again to both Illusion and Glamor. And then the endings, the end of the first one, which we kind of glossed over, was them actually getting married. They kind of talk about, like, Wanda's like, we are a peculiar couple, and Wanda's like, yeah, but like, how come we don't have a song or an anniversary day or wedding rings? And they kind of look at all of them and they're like, well, anniversary, today's our anniversary, like from here on in, like this will just be our anniversary. And what should our song be? And they go, yakety yak, don't talk back, which is a natural perfect pull from that first episode because of the song that was used there. And then Vision goes, well, rings, can't you do something about that? And they put up their hands, and boom, she throws the ring on both of their fingers at the same time, and you get the nice like awe from the audience, the studio audience that we hear throughout the episode. One of the other things I love, classic sitcoms have to have that studio audience laugh track and ahs and oohs, all those things. This is a really, really sweet moment. There's so much sweet, like the relationship stuff between them is so natural. I love watching Vision and Wanda, but specifically watching Bettany and Olsen. Like, just since the movies, their chemistry has been so good, and here you feel how much that they love each other. And like as soon as they're put on, like the way that they do, and it's just so natural. Bettany just like turns and goes, "I do. Do you?" She's like, "Yes, I do." And they kiss, And obviously the end of the second episode, another kind of big ending where Wanda, everything colorizes and Wanda becomes pregnant, which is super exciting for so many reasons. When you know what those kids are going to be. Wiccan and Speed will eventually, most likely, if they're in the universe and they bring them full on in, you're talking about people who are in the Young Avengers. That, again, these are things that we're setting up, for the rest of Phase 4 and MCU going forward. So I love all of the comic book elements that surround in the background. It's one of the things that Feige and Marvel has done with the cinematic universe so flawlessly right from the very get-go, is that, hey, we're going to adapt a story or do something that adapts something from a story that you do know, but we're going to present it to you in a way that you don't know. And we're going to litter it with all these kind of things that come from those places, vibes or visions or things that you see on screen. There with all these Easter eggs while creating our own thing. And the own thing that they're creating here, like I said, is really fascinating. How much of this is Wanda and Wanda alone? Is somebody manipulating her, like Strucker? Is S.W.O.R.D just trying to figure out what's going on to make sure something bad doesn't happen? Do they have anything to do with the force field that we've seen in the trailers that clearly is keeping the real world out of this almost like Pleasantville style world, with all the black and white? Who's playing where, and where are they going to fall into things? And, is S.W.O.R.D in the MCU going to be, the sentient weapon rather than sentient world observation department? How does that all play? And like I said, how much of it is Wanda fully being in control versus being manipulated? And who's doing the manipulation? All these things are kind of sitting out there for us to grab. And I want to immediately go, Strucker is definitely somewhat behind this and probably pulling the strings. But knowing Marvel, that might be a crumb that's leading to a dead end, to try to keep us off the trail. And if you're having a good mystery, we're going to need some red herrings. And maybe, people like Agatha and Monica and S.W.O.R.D and Stark Industries and Strucker, maybe they're red herrings. But either way, 2 episodes in, you've got me hooked and intrigued. Like, oh, all the threads you were pulling on, man, and all the things you're doing. You're setting up stuff that I want to see happen and kind of think, but I could also see this going somewhere else. So I'm really, really interested. I'll tell you this much. When I got to the end of the episodes, I was just sitting there, even more so than The Mandalorian, going, I wish these were all in line right now. Like, something about, like, The Mandalorian where it's, like, one episode, not always completely satisfying because they were also kind of short, but, like, satisfying enough where I'm good for a week. I get 2 episodes of WandaVision, I'm like, I just want to keep pushing play, man. Like, I don't want to wait a week for the next one or for the rest of these, which is genius because reality, I really do want that because I love the conversation that we get to have and we get to talk about it for a longer stretch, and we get to fill that stretch up to Multiverse of Madness with episodes over the course of an extended period of time. So I'm super jacked, man. I thought the first 2 episodes were phenomenal. I thought there's lots of goodies in there for everybody to kind of pull on and start making theories. It almost feels like a good mystery. They want you to start theorizing and trying to figure things out. And I'm sure some of these things that we're pulling on are dead-end threads. So which ones will be the red herrings, which ones will be the real thing, I'm really interested in. But for me, this is a mystery that is a really legit mystery. Like, I know what's going on, but I'm not really, really sure. And it's fun to see Marvel, again, playing in a genre that we really haven't seen them play in before. So there you go, man. I loved episodes 1 and 2, and I can't wait for this show to get rolling even past these. Like, just keep them coming, man. Give me multiple episodes every week, Disney Plus. Come on. But anyway, I love me some WandaVision. You've got all my spoiler thoughts. Now it's your turn, man. We're not on the spoiler or the non-spoiler review. We're on the spoiler review. So give me all your spoiler thoughts, man. What'd you think of WandaVision episodes 1 and 2? Which elements of the sitcoms were you enjoying? Which sitcom story did you like more? How did you think those stories played for the eras and that they're covering inside of those episodes? And how much of the MCU stuff are you digging? Do you feel the House of M undertones and what's going on with S.W.O.R.D and the drops of things like Stark Industries and Strucker, the watch, but Baron von Strucker, clearly the nod there in these commercials? Do you think these commercials are tying into the show? Do you think they're relevant? Or is it just a way to play nods, just give us like, oh, hey, that's something I know from the comic books, and they're just in there because the show is supposed to be like a sitcom, so you should have a commercial break. Anything you're thinking about, any of that stuff, where we're going with Wanda? What about Wiccan and Speed? Is Vision real? Like, is he really created, or is he actually part of Wanda's mind? That's one of those things that Doctor Strange in the comics and Professor X say to Wanda when they're trying to help her is, stop creating these things. They're not real. They're parts of you. And the more and more that she creates things or manipulates reality, the more and more out of control she becomes because it becomes to kind of consume her. So as she, like I said, it took us a whole episode before we saw her manipulate something right in front of us. And then, later on in the episode, obviously we see her do it more and more. And by the end of the episode, now all of a sudden things are in color. Is she losing her control of the powers the more that she manipulates inside this world? What do you think is going on? Where are we going? What are your theories? What are the things you're digging? Anything good, bad, indifferent about WandaVision? Goes down below, man. Be spoiler heavy. And if you haven't seen the episode, are you pumped? Do you want to go watch them? Are you pissed that I'm sorry that we just spoiled the whole thing for you. But if somehow you've watched this whole thing and you haven't seen the show, Does this make you want to go watch it, check it out more? Are you more interested? Anything you're thinking, down below in the comment section. Look forward to talking to you down there. As always, if you enjoyed this review, please give me a thumbs up. And if you're new, you want to come hang out with the old C-Man every Friday as we watch WandaVision over the next few weeks until it gets to its end. And you want to see where we're going. You want to just be here for any time I'm talking movies, TV, or trailer reactions. You just dig what we're doing, want to show a little support, show a little love to the old C-Man. Well, I encourage you to do that by joining the C-Maniacs. Jumping over there, hit that subscribe button. You can come be a C-Maniac. If you do that, hit that little bell if you want those alerts. And until next time, for the C-Man's Cinema, sit down. I've been the C-Man. I'm signing off. Peace.
Well, as I live and breathe, you still here? Check out a video like this one or this one. And hit the subscribe button so you can get alerts and check out everything the C-Man's got at the Cinema Sit Down.